So a warm welcome to each one of you. So nice to be here, practicing in person, practicing together online. Really, I always feel a lot of joy to know that you're taking care of your lives in this way of practicing Dhamma. So this is the Sunday Sounds of Dhamma, and before I get started, I just have a couple of announcements. So one announcement is we're having our first movie night. It's a drop-in. There will be popcorn Wednesday, January 29th at 6:30 here at the vihara. And we're going to watch a movie about Xuanzang. Xuanzang is a Chinese monk who basically snuck out of China to go to India and look for some books, some texts, and some teachings that he was interested in. And of course, had a great adventure along the way. And also, I will be leaving for my pilgrimage. So I'm going on pilgrimage to the four key sites of the Buddha's life in India and Nepal. I leave on February 6th, and I'll be back on the 25th, probably out of commission until the 26th. But what I wanted to say is that means there will be 3 Sundays in February where it will be virtual only. So for folks who are here today, just so that you know, don't come to the vihara those 3 weekends. It's all going to be up on the website, so you don't need to figure out which days those are. But just know that while I'm away, there will be Sunday morning programs, Sunday Sounds of Dhamma program. I've invited some really, really wonderful teachers. I hope you enjoy them. And also Friday night Sutta contemplation will be paused during that period. So anybody who was interested in doing that, either virtually or in person, that program will not be happening while I'm away. And yeah, registration is currently open for retreats in Spanish in Latin America for any Spanish speakers who want to head on down there with me. And pretty soon we will be opening the registration for the June retreat, which is a really beautiful, it's a week long, and then there's an opportunity for an extension of another 4 days to really settle in beautifully here in Northern Virginia at a place called Seven Oaks. All right, so that is that. And so we'll begin as usual with about 10 minutes of guided meditation, 10 or 15 minutes. And then I'll give some sort of a Dhamma talk, some reflection. And then we'll have a bit of time toward the end for any kinds of comments or questions, concerns, corrections, all the sharing that wants to happen, and then the dedication of merit at the very end. So for now, just going to do a mindfulness of breathing. And before we get started, I want to say, if you feel a tendency to kind of control the breath or get tight and stressed about the breath, then you can do mindfulness of breathing by attending to the movement in your lower abdomen. You can pay attention to it there, rather than, say, at your nostrils or in your chest or some other place where you might feel it. Any place is okay, but if your tendency is to control, then it's good to watch it there, because biologically, physiologically, it's not actually happening there, right? So you can't really mess with it. You're just observing it. Okay? All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Some gentle movement of the body. Not necessary to have a perfect posture, but it is helpful to sort of loosen up any tendency we have to be leaning toward the screen or to be hunched over. We really want to find that upright and balanced position. And you'll know, one way you might know when you find that position is that you can begin to feel the weight of the body on your seat. Releasing the belly. There's no need to hold on or be anywhere else. You just settle right here, right now. Softening the eyes and softening the mouth. And by now, perhaps the sensations of the breath breathing the body have started to come into your awareness. Maybe you feel them in the nostrils or in the throat, in the chest or in the back, or all the way down in the lower abdomen. And you can just rest the mind on those sensations of the breath, taking care of the body. Staying curious about the sensations of the breath breathing the body. How is it right now? And you might notice perhaps some pauses between the parts of the breath. And again, you can just rest the mind in those natural moments of stillness. And allowing the mind to rest in the moments of stillness between the breaths. You might also notice the shift, the start of each part of the breath. A clear point of impermanence, change from stillness into movement. All right, friends, that brings us to the end of the meditation for this program. And if you have any questions or reflections about that, we can talk about that at the end. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and move into the Dhamma talk. So Jet, if you would help pass out the chant cards. And folks online, give me just a moment to get that pulled up. Great, so just keep your mics muted. Folks who are here, welcome to chant along. This is the ancient Indic language of Pali, somewhat related to Sanskrit. It's what we call a Prakrit, and it's the language of some of the earliest sutras, some of the earliest teachings of Buddhism. And if it's unfamiliar, it's really fine to just let it wash over you, or you can give it a try and stumble through. That's also really fine. And this is basically just saying homage to the Buddha, the awakened one, the fully enlightened one. And then that we say that 3 times. And then Buddhang, Dhammang, Dhamma is the teachings or the reality to which the teachings are pointing. And Sangha, Sangha is, broadly speaking, the community, the broad community of practitioners. And Namasami is, again, honor or paying respects to all of us. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Please don't put it on the floor. Thanks. So I was thinking about what to share with you this week, given everything that's going on in the world. You know, the world is always turning and churning and and change comes. And I thought about it, and I thought, if there's ever a time when we need to talk about right speech, this is the time. So right speech is one of the factors, it's called the Noble Eightfold Path, right? The 8 main factors of the path. And right speech is one of them. And I think that really reflects the commitment of the tradition to a practice of truth, of being honest, of being truthful, and speaking in that way. But it's not just about that. It's not quite that simple. It's actually a fairly complex topic, and anybody who's tried to conduct themselves with right speech will know that all sorts of thoughts and considerations come into play. In fact, my dear friend Jana Draka, who's passed now, a fellow priest at San Francisco Zen Center, used to say, yeah, you know, if I if I think too hard about right speech, I won't say anything because it's too hard to really fathom. And hopefully that's not what happens. Hopefully we don't get completely shut down about it. But I want to even address the question of whether to speak up, because I think that in Buddhism there has been, especially in American Buddhism, there has long been a debate about this, about whether we should just not say anything. And so I brought a sutta, and I shared this last night, so folks who saw yesterday afternoon, so folks who saw my talk, this is a different talk than yesterday afternoon's talk, but it is this one part of it I'm actually going to share again. And a sutta is the records that we have of the historical Buddha, this man who lived 2,600 years ago in India. He was a human being, not a deity, and he actually discovered this path to enlightenment, this path to a life of absolute inner peace and wisdom and compassion. And so there's this conversation with a gentleman named Potalia. Potalia. And Potalia was a wanderer. So in the Buddha's time, as is true today in India, there were many people, sort of spiritual seekers, just sort of wandering around, right? Maybe they're meditating, maybe they're chanting, maybe they're doing, fire ceremonies. They're doing all sorts of different practices. So Potalia approached the Buddha, and I love it that it says, and they exchanged greetings and cordial talk. And we see this also quite often in the suttas. And usually I skip over that part of the sutta. I don't really share about that. But that is actually important to this particular conversation, right? That Potalia doesn't walk up and just demand an answer to his question or even ask a question. He first, approaches in a polite way, and they have a bit of exchange. And then the Buddha is giving him a teaching. And he's giving him a teaching about right speech. And he says there are 4 kinds of people in the world. And I'm not going to go through that whole thing because this is actually not the main sutta of my talk today. But Potalia says in response to the Buddha's teaching that he gave him, he says, yes, Master Gautama, that's how he refers to the Buddha, because apparently he's not sure whether he's the awakened one or not. And that's okay. They're still able to have a conversation. He says, yes, there are these 4 kinds of persons existing in the world. And of these 4, the one that seems to me the most excellent is the one who does not speak dispraise of someone who deserves dispraise. So this is Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. And so I don't know why he uses this strange word, dispraise. It's like criticism, right, or critique. And who does not speak praise of someone who deserves praise, though the praise would be accurate, truthful, and timely. For what reason? Because what excels, or what is excellent, is equanimity. So this is Potalia's assertion. And I would say a lot of folks can resonate with that. A lot of folks can empathize with that. A lot of folks come to the practice for the purpose of equanimity. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a very, very important quality for us to cultivate. And I've given some talks about it. There are many different practices that we can do to really cultivate equanimity. And to be clear, equanimity doesn't necessarily mean sort of tranquility or like calming down the sense of stimulation. Equanimity, in the Buddhist way of speaking about it, especially the earliest Buddhist way, means being able to meet and counter the conditions that are present in your life without being thrown off balance. Right? Sometimes I refer to it as it's like having your sea legs, You're able to kind of be present with whatever is happening. So Potalia, we appreciate him, I appreciate him, says, I value that very highly. And I say, yeah, I value that very highly too. But the Buddha gives a perhaps surprising response to this. And the Buddha says this, he says, yes, Potalia, there are these 4 kinds of persons. And of these 4, the one that is the most excellent and sublime is the one who speaks dispraise of someone who deserves dispraise. And the dispraise or criticism is accurate, truthful, and timely. And one who also speaks praise of someone who deserves praise, and the praise is accurate, truthful, and timely. Why? Because what is excellent, Battalia, is knowledge of the proper time to speak in any particular case. Somebody please take this away before it gets spilled. Thank you. So this is a very interesting response from the Buddha. The Buddha saying that our own equanimity is not more important than speaking the truth. When we see a problem in the world or when we see something wonderful in the world. Wow, that's kind of interesting, huh? It's not more important than actually speaking out. And for me, the reasoning behind that, although the Buddha doesn't go into it in this sutta, the reasoning behind that is compassion, right? When we see something wrong, passivity isn't what we're called to. Compassion compels us to say, oh yes, my practice is, to the extent that I can, to say something in the hopes of lessening the suffering, my own suffering and the suffering of other beings. That's part of what we do, right? It's not the selfishness of the practice that says, my own peace of mind is more important. Your peace of mind is important, and hopefully both things can be possible. Equanimity and speaking out are possible. But we need to have, as I said, a very nuanced understanding of what the Buddha means, what we mean in general, what we personally mean by right speech. So I wanted to speak about a different sutta, and this is a sutta in which the Buddha is having a conversation about right speech with Prince Abhaya. And so that's why I have my copy of the dictionary, the tome here, the dictionary of Pali proper names out, was to see a little bit of something more about Prince Abhaya. So Prince Abhaya was the son of King Bimbisari. That's not the proper pronunciation. Hold on. Bimbisara, thank you. He was the son of King Bimbisara, and his mother was Padmavati, who was said to be a very beautiful woman, and she and the king had a very good relationship. There's other suttas about that. But anyway, Prince Abhaya was a very sensitive soul. When his father died, when the King Bimbisara died, he was very, very distraught. And he ended up actually joining the monastic order, the Buddhist monastic order, and practicing. And actually, it said, becoming a fully awakened being. So he was a very, very, a person very sensitive to the Dharma. And so he asked this question, which he's kind of been set up to do, because before he was one of the students of the Buddha, he was a student of the Jain teacher, Nigatanataputta. Nigatanataputta was of a different sect, you could say, of seekers. The Jainism still exists in India. There are people practicing that kind tradition, religious tradition. And so Prince Abhaya approaches him with what he thinks is this kind of unanswerable question, about saying something that will be disliked by the receiver. Because according to the prince, he says, well, if you say, yeah, you just say it, then your whole rhetoric, the Buddha's whole rhetoric about causing less suffering is just bunk. You're out there causing more suffering by what you're saying. But if you say, no, don't say it, then what's the point in that if it's truth? So maybe some of the same thoughts, similar thoughts that other people have had about right speech. So the Buddha goes into this very complex analysis of it. And I'm going to try to simplify this a bit just so that we can really follow along and have it be applicable to the way you think about how you speak and how you move in the world. Yeah. But just to say, this is one of the few times that I will share my notes. And I made this whole matrix about this sutta. That's how complicated the sutta is. That I was teaching this a while back, and I thought, oh, I better really kind of write it all down. And it's Majjhima Nikaya 58. It's Middle Length Discourse 58. And because it's a Middle Length Discourse, again, we won't go through it in detail. But the Buddha starts out by saying, if you're going to say something that is false, that is harmful, that is going to be disliked by that other person, then definitely don't say that, right? So now he's talking to a royal, he's talking to somebody who might have reasons to speak falsely to other people, who might think they have reasons to speak falsely to other people or say something harmful, right? These are folks who were at war with one another at various points in time. So he says what might sound to us is quite obvious. First, don't say that. In fact, he calls that speech like dung. Speech like dung, something which is false, something which is clearly harmful, something which will be disliked by the receiver. Don't do it, he says. Don't even go there. Not only because of the impact that you have on that person, but also because you are forming more agitation in your own mind and more delusion. Anytime we say something false, we are increasing delusion in our own mind and in the world. Not such a helpful thing. We really need to think about it when we do that. So then he goes on to say, well, if it's true, but it's going to be harmful, then still don't say it. Even if it's true, but you know that it's going to be harmful and it's not going to be liked by the other person, then definitely don't say it. So an example of this is like a parent saying something to their child, which might be true about how they're feeling, but is going to hurt the kid. Like a parent who says, I hate you. Even if that's what the parent's really feeling, that's not okay to say that. So as I said at the beginning of the talk, just truth isn't enough, isn't the standard, actually, at least as we understand it in the Buddhist tradition. Then there's the false, the lie, which is harmful, but the other person will like, the other person will receive well, right? This is called lying to keep the peace. Or sometimes people call it the little white lie. And again, the Buddha says, basically, that's just causing harm. You might think that it's keeping the peace, but it's actually causing harm. I myself lived through this in my marriage to Kayla's dad, Timothy. It was ultimately an abusive relationship, and I had to make a change. But there was a point in time where I felt like I could just manage that by lying. And of course, that turned out not to be true, right? It doesn't really work. I would suggest that there is no such thing as keeping the peace by lying. Then there's the case of something that's true and that the person will like hearing, will be happy to hear, but that's ultimately harmful. So a couple of examples of this would be gossip, right? If you're saying something about someone else, and we use this as a way of bonding. I used to notice this a lot, you know, within Sangha and within other organizations, that people bond over cutting somebody else down or talking behind their back about something, right? That's the true but harmful, but liked by the receiver. Yeah. The other example of this is the ICE agent at your door. Or the Nazis, right? It might be true that you have someone that you are hiding, or that there's someone undocumented in your house. And it might be that that person would very much like to hear about that. But to say that would be harmful. So you wouldn't. The Buddha isn't saying you would lie, you would find some other way around it, if possible, if at all possible. But you don't speak the truth, even the truth that somebody standing in front of you wants to hear, if it's going to be harmful. So for folks who are not from this country, ICE is immigration enforcement here in the United States. And there are now, starting this week, a lot more enforcement and possibility of deporting people who are here without the proper documentation. So as somebody who is from an immigrant family, I'm Latina. My father is from Bogota, Colombia. He came over before I was born. And thankfully, he had a path to citizenship. He came over here in a way that he could become a citizen. But that's not true for everyone. So I'm not trying to be political here. I'm just trying to share something about what I think is a compassionate and non-harmful response to what's happening in our society. Because no matter what, I'm on the side of non-harm. I'm not on anybody's particular political side. I'm on the side of non-harm. And I am really encouraging you to be that way too. So that's the case of the truth, which is harmful and liked. The Buddha says, don't say it. Don't say it. And finally, we get to the case that Prince Abaya was asking about, which is the case of something that is true and is beneficial, but it will be disliked by the person receiving it. So this is the case, right, of criticism of something that deserves criticism. We have to be very careful about this, right? We have to really be careful about our understanding of what's true, about our understanding of what's beneficial. We have to be open to some dialogue around that. But ultimately, the Buddha gives this beautiful teaching that if you need to say something that is true and beneficial, but that the other person is not going to receive well, then know the proper time. Find the right time to do that. And I love that teaching because it is so nuanced, right? It is so skillful. It's saying, I don't just get in your face and blurt out something that I know to be true and that I think will help you. I actually stop to consider, what's the right time for you and I to have that conversation, for you to receive that in a way that will be beneficial? What's the right time in terms of what's helpful? So know the right time. And I would suggest that, again, right now is the right time to be speaking about many important things that the receiver might not appreciate. But we find our way, and the reason why we find our way is, again, it's all about compassion. Are we motivated by compassion? Are we motivated by the wish to reduce suffering for ourselves and others? And if that's the case, then we will find a beneficial way to do it. We will find a skillful way to do it. We need to. We need to. And then lastly, I know that I'm pretty much at the end of my time, but I do want to tell you one more little story. And that is the question of whether or not we will be heard. So I'm going to tell you a little story about an encounter that I had over in Washington, D.C. So I moved here about 3 years ago to live in Alexandria, Virginia, which is the same town where my daughter lives, my adult daughter, Kayla. And I moved here 3 years ago, and I had literally just arrived a few days earlier with my friend Terry. Terry and I drove cross country from California, where I was living in the monastery and training there. And we said, oh, it's the weekend, we'll go over to Eastern Market. Eastern Market is this beautiful, outdoor marketplace in the city of Washington, D.C. Kind of lots of people with their tents and their tables and folks selling clothes and food and candles and all sorts of things. It's kind of a fun place to go and visit if the weather's good. And I arrived in July, so it was okay. It was different weather than we have today. So great. So we went to Eastern Market. We had a meal. We had a nice meal at a restaurant there. And then we were walking back toward the car when this black gentleman approached me, right? And at that time, I was wearing my Theravada robes. I was wearing this kind of more traditional orange Buddhist robe. And this gentleman walks up to me. And the one thing that I remembered was especially he had on this vest with these beautiful African cottons, these bright patterned cottons. And he walked up to me, and I could tell right away he's pretty upset. He's very much struggling. And I don't remember his exact words, but he was basically saying, like, why is it that we cannot have peace? Why is it that we cannot have justice for Black men like him in this country? Why is it? And I said something to him roughly, again, I don't remember the exact words, but in an attempt to answer the why, I said to him, the world that we see is just a group of conditions that it comes together and it's the world that we see. But if we want peace, we have to begin with being peace ourselves, in ourselves. And he said, well, what about all the shootings and the violence that's happening down the road from here? Just a few blocks from here in my neighborhood. What about all that? And I said to him, apropos of the fact that it's January now, it's good to recall these moments. I said to him, you know, we really need to listen to the teachings of the good Reverend Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr., and learn how to stand in our place. Stand up in our place, steady. And this gentleman leaned even closer. So we were already face to face. And he leaned even closer into me, into the conversation. And he said, but they shot him in the head. They didn't hear him. They didn't hear him. And he winced at his own words. And I said very quietly, because he's very close to me at that time, I said, they did hear him. We hear him. And he stopped, and he turned his head for a minute, and he took a step back, and he asked me my name. And so I asked his name, and we talked. We talked a little bit about what's going on for him. It's stressful, it's hard living in DC like that. And ultimately, as he walked away, he said, you know, people of peace like you and me, we got to do the work. I said, yes, exactly. Yes, we got to do the work. And I learned so much from that encounter, but the one thing that sticks with me that I want to share today is the we. Until there was a we in it, there wasn't actually a meeting. There wasn't actually the opportunity to see each other as people. That he could see this white Latina Buddhist person as a person. And I could see this African American man as a person, just trying to find some answers, just trying to find some answers, trying to find some peace. So I hope that you all keep in your hearts that knowing that we can say the compassionate thing. We can speak up if we find the right time to do it, and if we find the we in it. Thank you so much. That's what I wanted to share. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions and reflections. Thank you so much, Derek. I didn't think you were going to hold on to it the whole time, but thank you.
Not much place to put it, so
Yeah.
it's all right.
It's okay.
You calmed down too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're laughing here because Nino must share all beverages, but we're not always sharing all beverages with Nino. So Nino is the vihara cat. Mm-hmm. Right. He doesn't look too stressed about it. Mm. Okay. Yes, Brad, I see you have your hand up, please.
Just uncanny timing once again. I just received a note from a lay teacher in the Far East questioning something that I had said. And he was saying, look, just follow the Buddha's rules, ignore everything going on outside, and be happy.
Mm.
And,
Mm.
you know, and I had to really struggle with an appropriate response. My inside voice wanted to say, show me one of the Buddha's rules that says ignore everything going on outside.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that. Anyway, I'll see later on whether my response was how it was received. But this, I mean, right speech is just so essential and so difficult. What I mean, you know, I can say something with the best of intentions, but there can be one word in there that I interpret one way and somebody else, it has a different nuance for them because of their experience. And all of a sudden, you know, I've triggered some old hurt or something. You know, it's really, it's a tough gig being an embodied human being.
Yes.
So anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you for sharing that, Brad. Definitely. And yeah, I agree with you. I think that the question of impact versus intention, both things matter. That's part of what the teaching is telling us, that both impact and intention matter, and we are not always clear about either of those two things, and we do our best to try to be clear. And I would say yes, right. You know, everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome in the Dhamma. Everyone, literally, right? Even Angulimala, who was a serial killer, was welcome in the Dharma. He actually became a teacher eventually. And so, and we need to be the voice for wholesomeness in the world as best we can. We need to stand up for that. We need to stand in our places, just as the good Reverend Doctor said. Yeah. And I would say, empathetic to your friend, however, that the Buddha also talked a lot about seclusion, both bodily seclusion and mental seclusion, right? Sometimes we need to go away. Sometimes we do need to step back and just find our place again, find, you know, sort it out, find some peace, some relaxation, some clarity, right? So I hope that, you know, it was clear that what I'm suggesting is that we can do both. We can work on our equanimity and we can stand in our places for what's really important to us, what our values are. Yeah, thanks for the reflection, Brad. Okay, we might have time for one more question. Yeah, here, Derek, you can use that one.
Thank you for talk today. Can you go, is there more kind of explanation on the piece that kind of underpins that sutra of what is considered accurate and true? Considering my wife and I, for example, have differing opinions of what's considered accurate and true sometimes. So yeah, if there is, because I can't imagine it's like kind of, there's absolute truths or things like that in Buddhism, but if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's again, it's very incumbent upon us to really examine that question. What is accurate? What is true? Right? We can often think that we know and we don't know very well. That's the nature of delusion, right? We are all suffering with our own form of confusion about the world to one degree or another until we're fully awakened beings. So there's that. There's You know, somebody asked about this actually last night in a teaching, yesterday afternoon in the teaching that I was giving. And because I often talk about this, that you can, by virtue of your practice of investigating your experience of the world, understand the truths of our lives. And the Buddha didn't give one truth, right? He gave actually a minimum of 4, 4 noble truths, right? That there is dukkha, or sort of unsatisfactoriness, unfulfillingness, suffering aspect of life, that there are causes for that. There is one particular cause of clinging, which is the strongest cause, he said, and that there is cessation of dukkha, that we can see actually moment by moment cessation of dukkha, but there is ultimate cessation of dukkha, which is the peace of awakening, and that there is the path to that. So there's a minimum of 4 truths that the Buddha put out there. And he also described these kinds of three attributes of everything, that they are impermanent, that they are ultimately this kind of dukkha and fulfilling, and that they are non-self, that they are not sort of independent, separate, permanent things that create a self that is separate from the world. But other than that, right, other than these, you could say the kind of universal sweeping principles, karma, for example, or kamma in Pali, karma in Sanskrit, other than that, you kind of have to work it out for yourself. And he says, you know, to the Kalamas, for example, he says, well, check in with people that you think are wise and check in for yourself. Does it cause more greed? Does it cause more hatred? Does it cause more delusion? Okay, well, then chances are pretty good that there's something wrong there. If it goes to the other side, less greed, less hatred, less delusion, then chances are pretty good there's something wholesome there. So that's it. He puts it back on us. Yeah, he puts it back on us. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, we are pretty much at our time. So Dana, would you like to make the announcement for today?
Yes. The practice of giving and receiving has been a part of Buddhism since its inception. Giving to the Dassanaya Buddhist Community supports our guiding teacher, Dhammadīpā, the physical location at the vihara, and allows us to continue to offer Buddhist teachings to support the awakening of all beings. Our support pages are on the website under the support tab. Donate, volunteer, material supports, and also journey. Thank you for being here today, and see you next time.
All right, thank you so much, Dana. And yes, much, much, much gratitude to all of you for your presence and your supports in the various and sundry ways. So we will be back here again next Sunday in the usual way. And then again, as I said, I'll be on my journeys. So dedicating the merits, the beneficial karmic momentum that we have created by our practice here today, that we and all beings might be free from mental suffering, that we and all beings might be free from physical suffering, that all beings may realize compassion and wisdom as themselves by the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and each one's efforts. May we all be liberated. All right, friends. So wonderful to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.